Rockin' Royal, rockin' Navy, know y'all with me, let's get it, baby, Rockin' Royal, rockin' Navy, know you with me.
Welcome back to the Rockin' Royal Soccer Show, the podcast for those who rock the Y on the pitch, and off it somewhat, I guess, because honestly, I debated whether or not to record this episode. It was not a great week for the BYU women's soccer team. We'll get into that a little bit more. But before we get to that, happy Labor Day to all of those who celebrate the American workforce and the labor movement in the United States. We're recording this on Monday, September 2nd. That is Labor Day. Yes, that is a day earlier than we normally do. But we figured we might as well take advantage of the long weekend and get some hashtag soccer content out to you good folks as quickly as possible. I'm Sean Walker, as always, from KSL.com, your host, joined by my fabulous co-host, Carla Swensen-Haslem, former BYU women's soccer player, now BYUtv and ESPN Plus soccer analyst, the guru to my whatever this is. I'm hashtag soccer guy, but she's hashtag soccer guru. Carla, thanks as always for joining me.
Thank you. I appreciate that my hashtag changes every single week. I'll have a nice list of hashtags that I can add to my resume following the, first season of this Rockin' Royal podcast. But always happy to be here. Always happy to talk some footy and especially BYU soccer.
We're going through a little bit of a branding process or a branding crisis at times over here at Rockin' Royal. Who knows? There may be a different name of this podcast pretty soon. You never really know. That seems to be the in vogue thing right now. You change after every 3 or 4 episodes. But enough about some of my other things. But Carla, let's dive right into it because it was in some ways a tough week. We knew that Jen Rockwood likes to schedule up her non-conference play, their preseason, as they call it, because once you get into conference play, that's when it really matters, or doubly matters at least. We knew that this non-conference schedule was going to be tough. It got really tough this past week. Road trips to number 3 UCLA and then number 19 Utah State, fresh off of their first top 25 national ranking in program history, coming in to Southfield on the weekend. Non-conference play is almost over, and BYU is sputtering towards that line with a 1-0 loss to the Bruins and then a 2-1 home loss to Utah State. Should we go in chronological order? Let's jump right into Westwood a little bit here, because this was a game that I know a loss is a loss, and I don't want to take anything away from UCLA in any means, and I don't want to try to kind of over-explain away this loss in some ways. Like, a loss is a loss is a loss. And I can't stand – I don't know how you felt about moral victories when you were a player, but I personally can't stand them. I hate them, everything about them. They're worse than ties, which, as we know from children of the 90s and Mighty Ducks fans, are like kissing your brother. Moral victories are even worse in some ways. But I think there were a lot of things to feel good about this BYU team from this trip to UCLA. I mean, they technically put up more shots than the Bruins. Part of that was because UCLA scored first in the 6th minute through a goal from Meg Bodie. And then they were a little bit more willing to defend and maybe concede some possession here and there beyond the way. But there were some nice things to come out of this game. Lynette Ernez tied her career high with seven saves. I thought that was a positive. You saw Mackenzie Vance get a little bit more into the attack. We'll get more into that on Saturday on the weekend some. But she obviously looked pretty motivated to be playing out in Westwood on the field where she played most of her career before transferring to BYU. It's just the final touch wasn't there. There were a lot of misconnections in the final third, I think, that probably kept BYU from earning some kind of a result from this trip. But all in all, for a UCLA team that moved to 5-0 in their first year in the Big Ten, is a veritable contender, not just for a Big Ten championship. Yes, it's still weird for me to say that, but also for a national championship, I think. Again, we're 5 games into the season, so this can all change. But I thought BYU performed fairly admirably in this game. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I would agree with you. Obviously, you always want to win, but I think BYU fans in general were going into this game a bit scared, wondering if this UCLA team, who you're right is slated to be a potential contender to go deep into the NCAA tournament and possibly even to the College Cup, how BYU is going to do against them. And so to hold 1-0 off of a 6-minute goal that just came so quickly, I don't think BYU was ready for it to come so quickly and the attack to come so direct in the first few minutes. And then after that, to hold them, I think is actually really promising for this BYU squad. You look at the fan forums and you get an idea looking at the blog articles and whatnot of this game. Nobody seemed too upset with BYU's performance. They really did have some bright spots. It comes down to the same thing that we've repeated several weeks in a row now. It comes down to, can you score goals and can you get a high volume of goals? And BYU obviously unable to do that against UCLA. But to be honest, the team played pretty steady. And if you can hold a team that is ranked, is slated to go deep into the NCAA tournament, potentially even win the national championship, if you can hold them to one early goal, I think it was a good look for BYU. I think it's one of the better games that they've played this entire season, which, again, coincidentally, is they were playing probably their best team that they had played so far in the season.
Yeah, absolutely. If they can replicate performances like that, I think they're going to be better off more often than not, for sure. And I keep saying the praises of BYU's defense. BYU's defense has been very good overall. We'll get to maybe a little bit more that we can talk about the defense on Saturday here in a moment, but Avery Frischineck and Tara Warner and Presley Freeman, Ella Rustand, all of these defensive players have been very good this season. And a lot of the concerns coming into the year were in that back line. Well, that back line's adjusted very well. Again, to hold, like you said, to hold a team like UCLA to just one goal on I think they had like 7 shots on the night or something like that. Like that's fairly admirable in some ways. Again, not a moral victory. I hate moral victories. A loss is a loss is a loss. You have to take this L in this one, but there were a lot of good things, I think, to build on.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of things you can reciprocate. So even if you don't want to count it as a moral victory, it very much can be a textbook for what worked and how do we implement that. If we were able to do it against UCLA, logically we should be able to implement those same sort of tactics and skills against other opponents. And I know it's not so simple because other opponents have different personnel, different formations, play different styles. But in theory, if something worked against UCLA, you should be able to reciprocate that at practice. Once you reciprocate that at practice, time after time again, it'll become part of BYU's style for this season. And so I think only good can come of it. Even if on the record it shows as an L, I think the team can take some of that. And now even as they prepare to get into their conference play in a couple of weeks and can use that to play against teams that have similar styles. A Texas Tech is going to have a very similar style to UCLA, maybe not the same amount of talent and speed as UCLA, but they play a similar style. And so I think the BYU coaches will look back at this UCLA game and watch the film time after time, even as they get into conference play, to see if they can't continue with some of those same trends and patterns.
The trends, those patterns did continue on the weekend. 2-1 home loss to then number 19 Utah State. By the time some of you guys listen to this, after the United Soccer Coaches rankings are updated on Tuesday morning, I fully expect that 19 to be significantly higher. This is a top 15 Utah State team. I think you can make the case that this is trending to be one of the best Aggie teams in program history right now. Very, very good. And BYU falls 2-1, back-to-back losses to Utah State. I believe Coach Manny Martins is now 3-1-1 all time against the Cougars. There is some sort of magic that he is putting in the water in Logan right now, and Utah State is a veritable soccer factory. I mean, this program is very good. This team is very good. They returned a lot from a very good team last year, won the Mountain West Conference tournament, and they look like they're getting even better right now. Still unbeaten on the year, 3-0 against Big 12 programs. Actually, they were coming off of wins over a home win over Texas Tech and a win at Utah, both by shutout. They did go ahead early in this one, but Mackenzie Vance does get her first goal in a BYU uniform in this one. A gorgeous goal off of a free kick. I want you to break down this free kick for me a little bit, and I'll set it up just with this, Carla, to say there was a little bit of some trickeration. There may or may not have been a deflection. ultimately, it was just a perfectly placed ball right into the upper 90, just underneath the bar, that I thought was really nice. What did you make of McKenzie's goal when you saw it and kind of played it back and dived into it a little bit?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of elements and components to this. The first, and maybe this sets the scene for this set piece, is the fact that BYU has not been dangerous on set pieces. And Mackenzie Vance has not been the one taking them. And so perhaps this is a missing piece for this BYU squad who just corner kick after corner kick, set piece after set piece, free kick after free kick, just hasn't looked very good. And so the fact that Vance is now one of the players that is a go-to for that, I think is really great. The fact that she can score and put it up in the upper 90, put a little bit of a curve on it. You're right. I think there was a deflection off of it. I think says a lot for this team. We saw Vance have some set pieces in the blue and white game, and they were not, I think, what the squad wanted. I think she was still getting into her role. They weren't on target. They weren't quick enough. She gave it away a little too easily. She opened up her hips a little too much, so defenders and goalkeepers knew where she was going to go. But now she looks totally different. She was much quicker on the release. She did not make it predictable as to where she was going. Her body language, her hips, where her shoulders were facing, didn't make it obvious for the goalkeepers and defenders to know where the ball was going to go. And obviously there was much better aim and power on it. So it's awesome to be able to see her make those sort of improvements within just several weeks. And perhaps she always had the capability. Perhaps the blue and white game was just not, a good showing, as blue and white games tend to be really gritty and really exhausting, and usually after a week of two-a-days. So I'm giving her the benefit of the doubt that she's always been able to hit set pieces like that and hit shots like that. She just needed a game like Utah State to do it and be able to get her first one of her career here at BYU. And so I think it ultimately comes down to just how she hits it. She hits it with the inside of her foot, but on the upper part of her shoe to get it high, up and over.
Yeah, kind of laced it nice, yeah.
Yeah, and that allows it to get a little bit of a spin too, which is hard for goalkeepers. So all of that put together, I think, is promising. If BYU can become really dangerous on their set pieces, that'll be great, because then other teams have to be far more careful and cautious about getting fouls right outside of the box.
First goal allowed on the season by Utah State goalkeeper Shea Kircher-Pratt, who has been
really
phenomenal
good
in the first part of the year. She didn't play the first match. She started from match day 2 on, and she's been one of the better goalkeepers in the West, certainly in the Mountain West. Reigning Mountain West goalkeeper of the week last week when they came into Provo and whatnot. And she's probably going to be one of the better goalkeepers that this BYU team faces on the year, I would think. They're facing some really good ones. Like that's just the praise that I have for Shea. She's really good. Ultimately, doesn't matter. Tess Wertz gets the game winner in the 57th minute for this Utah State team. BYU threatened a couple of times after that, but not nearly enough. There were a couple of personnel changes, I think, that were important to talk about, and maybe that explains some of the statistical improprieties. Both teams had 13 shots apiece, so that's obviously good. But Utah State put 8 of those 13 shots on goal to just 2 for BYU, including the one off of Mackenzie Vance's set piece. I think a lot of that can be talked about because in addition to Ellie Walbrook, who's out for the season with a knee injury, Aaron Bailey's is still on the bench recovering from an illness, and Allie Fryer then joined that dynamic duo on the bench with the knock that she picked up earlier in the week as well. Those are 3 massive, decisive offensive weapons that BYU didn't have at its disposal. Again, and I don't think saying this and bringing this up as an excuse, at least I hope it's not an excuse, because Utah State very much won this game fair and square, but you do have to wonder how big of a deal Allie Fryer in particular, her presence is up top, and what having a fully healthy Fryer and Bailey could mean for this team, which hasn't had it now for a couple of weeks. So we'll see if that gets back, but or how quickly that can get back. But I can't help but feel like maybe that played into how this BYU team played in some ways. Sierra Pennock got her first start out there. She showed some nice moments, but she's also used to coming off of the bench as well. You saw a little bit more out of Lucy Kessler, especially later in the second half. Again, a very nice player, but also a very young player, true freshman, only 17 years old. I think she is. She graduated a year early, at least. So she's maybe barely coming up on 18. So you saw a lot more young players in there. And I just felt like lacking that veteran presence, particularly Allie Fryer, Aaron Bailey, really kind of just hurt this team from a leadership perspective on the game.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that. I remember, looking at some of these younger players, and the talent was obvious there because you'd see it in their first touch and the balls that they were sending in, but the speed perhaps wasn't that to what BYU wants. And that just comes with experience and time. Like, you give them time and they will catch up to Division I soccer speed at the highest level, right? And so I think that plays into it as well. And you're right. I don't think we can ignore the fact that BYU's top 3 attacking players were all out. Obviously, Walbrook will be out for the entire season, but that's something that perhaps would have changed this game. If your top 3 players are out and you're having to make substitutions to try to fill in those roles, like, that makes a huge difference, not only on the type of soccer that you're going to see, but also just the morale of the team. Mentally, they have to try to find it in them to grit through it and try to get a goal. And that's extra energy. That's expendable energy to try to find that mental stamina to push through so many players being out and gone. And I don't know how things would have changed. Maybe it would not have been different. BYU has had BYU's had a hard time scoring regardless, right? But Allie Fryer has been involved in over 80% of the goals that have been scored by this team. And so, logically, and looking at the statistics, we can't say that the game would not have been different had she been in. And then Aaron Bailey's good at sneaking in goals, getting a couple good looks a game too. All it takes is one to equalize and make it 2-2, and at that point it's anybody's game. And so you're right. I think BYU played pretty well against Utah State, but I think there were just a few things lacking and missing. And part of that could just be from inexperience and from missing so many players. It probably was a perfect storm for this, again, what is a very talented Utah State squad.
Yeah, and a team that I think will contend with or be at the very top of the Mountain West Conference this year.
I think they'll win it. I think they'll win the conference. I think they'll get a bid to the tournament. So, yeah, I mean, for the soccer fans out there, like, keep watching BYU, but Utah State should definitely be on your radar. And I can see them. They're starting to take recruits from Utah, not just in transferring, but in your high school club sports. There are now girls who had offers from Utah who are going to Utah State. And I could say the same of UVU, right? This is from an exhibition game earlier, but since we're talking about in-state teams, I think there's value in bringing up UVU. These are teams that are now starting to take recruits, high school recruits from Utah. And so we're only going to be more and more competitive as they compete against BYU, who's traditionally been the best team in the state.
Yeah, 100%. A little bit of a side note, we won't get too sidetracked on that, but Utah State will try to complete the in-state swing this Thursday night at Utah Valley in Orem, 7 p.m. ESPN Plus will have that game. Or if you can get one of the 700 tickets to Clyde Field there, that game could be an absolute banger of a contest. I'm just as a pure soccer fan, I'm really looking forward to that game.
Yeah, 2 really tactical coaches. I mean, Utah State's a great team. But honestly, I think so many of the games they win is because they outcoach their opponents. And I say the same of Coach LeMay and UVU. They're a great team. I don't take away from that, but I have seen them win so many games that they probably shouldn't have won. And I include Utah State in this, and I include games against BYU because they simply make tactical adjustments, both halftime and in game, that make all the difference.
Yeah, really looking forward to the Manny v. Chris chess match in that one. 2 coaches that have a very bright future. Well, and not just a bright future, but a bright present with them, a bright present and a bright future, I think, in Logan and Orem respectively there. But BYU returns to the pitch this Wednesday against Boise State, 7 p.m. Mountain Time. You can catch that one on ESPN Plus if you're not part of the 5,000 strong at Southfield in that one. They'll try to snap a 2-match losing skid against the Broncos. It's their penultimate, I love that word. Second to last for the non-linguists out there. A non-conference match. They'll wrap up non-conference play with the trip to Fayetteville, Arkansas against the Hogs this Saturday. And then it's on to Big 12 play. Big 12 opener Thursday, September 12th against Arizona State at 7 p.m. Carla, what do you want to see out of this BYU team as it puts the final touches on quote-unquote preseason non-conference play? Again, a very difficult non-conference play, but what's kind of a piece that you feel like is right there that you want to see out of this last week before Big 12 play gets into full gear?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I mean, the obvious ones are get some more goals and get more shots on goal and get inside the box. The reason BYU has so few shots on goal is just because so many of their shots are from far away. And so you lose some of the accuracy and some of the aim. So if I had to say, what is something I want to see from this BYU squad, aside from a win, it would be, let's see if they can be more of an offensive threat inside of the box. And I think those shots on goals will come more naturally. And I think goals will come more naturally. Their defense is playing well. Their midfield's still finding themselves, but they're getting there. I'm not as worried. I think they'll get there just with experience and time. The big question mark is still on the offense. So that's what I would love to see. And the Broncos may be an opportune moment to do that because it's at home.
Yeah, big question mark definitely on the offense. Also on the health of this team. Hopefully, best wishes to Ali Fryer in her recovery. I think she'll be back sooner than later. I think Aaron Bailey is getting closer to recovery for sure. Obviously, we mentioned Coach Walbrook, Ellie Walbrook, going to take a redshirt season with that ACL injury that she suffered during the spring. But I think this team also just needs to get a little bit healthier after it's been sneakily bit by a couple of key injuries. And that was always going to be an issue with this squad. You know, they lose so much that you can make do with some of the leadership coming back and Allie and Aaron and Lynette Ernez in the back and some of those players, Avery Frischknecht, even with some quality leadership, but the depth wasn't quite there. And you knew eventually it was going to be tested. It probably got tested a little bit last week, and we'll see how they respond from it this Wednesday. Again, that's Wednesday against Boise State, 7 p.m. You can catch that on ESPN Plus or head on down to Southfield, like some of us, for the final home non-conference match of BYU's 2024 campaign. Carla, anything else that we didn't touch on or anything else to kind of wrap us up and send us out?
No, I think you got it. I think this will be a good one for the fans and the students to be able to come enjoy some good soccer. So definitely mark it on your calendars. I'm sad I won't be able to call the game. I'll be out of town on the East Coast for a work trip, but I will be keeping tune to everything that's going on, and I look forward to chatting more about it next week.
And we'll have a full breakdown on how Carla's replacements do on the ESPN Plus.
They're all
podcast.
wonderful.
So I want you to take some notes, give some coaching, to whether it's I don't know, Cass or Jerem or Jason or whoever it is it's going to be replacing you. Nobody can truly replace Carla Swensen-Haslem, but we all sometimes have to try every now and then.
You are sweet for saying that. No, the people who they have come replace me always do a great job and are wonderful. Many of them are former teammates of mine, and so I have so much respect for them.
For former BYU soccer star Carla Swensen-Haslem, now BYUtv and ESPN Plus analyst, I'm Sean Walker from KSL.com saying till next time, see you on the pitch.